Well, welcome once again to the Ahern Video Podcast. Today I want to talk about defining cost and how to compete with the big boys. I've been contacted by numerous trade publications, and I've also been contacted by a lot of small to medium-sized carriers, and they say it's getting increasingly difficult for us to stay in business. It's increasingly difficult for us to compete with the big boys. It's increasingly difficult, it's increasingly difficult, it's increasingly difficult. And the answer is yes, it's increasingly difficult. But the first thing you have to understand is until you can define what your costs are, until you can define, if you're a trucking company, what it costs you to dispatch that truck, or if you're a freight broker, what are all your operating costs in your dispatch and your carrier costs to make sure that you get a predetermined profit, you're never going to be able to compete. I can categorically state that many carriers do not understand what their costs are. You hear the term cost of transportation, and you listen to all these various experts, and they're defining this cost, but we allocate this cost over here, we allocate this cost over here, and by the time you're finished, you're so confused. And if you listen to them long enough, you start to fall asleep. But here's the bottom line. Whatever it costs you to dispatch that truck and get it on the road, that cost should be included in your rating structure. You need to know what your fixed overhead is. And a lot of people don't. For example, the other day, we're working on a project, and I'm asking them to find their cost on turnover and how do they allocate the turnover costs. And they give me this big, huge conglomeration of facts and figures, but I said, I want you to define what's in this cost, 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 and they couldn't. And he says, well, our recruitment cost is $35,000 to $4,000. And I said, well, the ATA says it's closer to $6,000. But here's what I did. I called a random sampling of 10 of our customers of all sizes, some of them over $1 billion of revenue, some of them 30 million of revenue, some of them 10 million of revenue. I asked them to find their cost, and they did. And guess what? You're not making any money, but your costs are lower than everybody else's. And the point I was trying to make is you don't know what your costs are. You make these assumptions, and you believe that this is what your costs are, but you have no clue what your costs are. Well, how are you going to operate at a profit? How are you going to stay ahead of the curve if you don't define your cost? I was working on an audit not too long ago, and the guy says, I am very technologically proficient. And I said, okay, so he brings out these reams and reams and reams and reams of paper. And I turned around and I gave him one sheet. And I said, now I want you to take all these reams of paper, and I call it a dashboard report, and this is what I want you to get every day from your operations department. And he looks at me, and he starts looking at all the line item costs. He says, my God, that's so simple. Well, the form is simple, but extracting the information may not be as simple as it may seem. But the bottom line is this: when you dispatch a truck, everything's about utilization. If you don't get enough utilization and that driver doesn't get enough pay, what's going to happen? I hear all the time, well, I make some money on my fuel surcharge. Well, if you're using independent contractors or lease purchase agreements, come on. That fuel surcharge should be passed right on to the driver. He or she needs that revenue to offset their operating expenses. Many times I've heard that we've had this budget meeting. We've done these cost allocations. And our sales department says they can't get a rate increase here, they can't get a rate increase here, they can't get a rate increase here. And they already asked for a rate increase, so they can't get it again because we have on-time performance issues. Well, the point I'm trying to make is as you start defining your cost, and as you start recognizing what that actual cost is, it's going to send up a red flag. It's going to send up an alert signal. It's going to get you to think, and it's going to get you to start thinking outside of the box. I don't care if you got 10 trucks. I don't care if you've got 10,000 trucks. You got to operate with a basic fundamental that you need to know what your costs are. And if you are a trucking company, you need to know what every line item expense is. Do you need a $100,000 software program? Absolutely not. I've told you continuously about the software program that we utilize and we market, and it's not a sales pitch, but it's off your own P&L statement. It'll track every single dispatch for every single customer for every single lane, and it'll actually print an operating ratio for you. It'll have a predetermined profit. You can load it into your laptop. Everybody says, I want it to be integrated into dispatch. I want it to be integrated into accounting. Why? It's a pricing tool. The fundamental results will be integrated into accounting. The bigger companies, yes, they want to. But if you're running 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 trucks, you just want to know every time you sent that driver out, did that driver make money? Did you get utilization? Was that a good customer or losing customer? You need to be able to analyze every single customer dispatch. And there are programs out there that are very reasonably priced that you can utilize to your benefit. I had a guy call me the other day and we did an operational assessment. He says, I've taken a swing from $1 million operating loss to $1 million profit. Thank you so much. And I said, what are you thanking me for? He says, well, look at what you've done. I said, we didn't do anything. What we went in is we assessed the issues, we assessed the problems, we provided you a roadmap, we told you to do this, this, this in a certain amount of time. This will be the bottom line, this, 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 this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you had to implement the changes, so pat yourself on the back. But here's where you're weak. You're not tracking your cost. He says, I'm making $1 million, so I have a pretty good idea what my costs are. So I ran a lane for him. I said, okay, what are your costs here? And he told me. He was off by 40%. He said, but why should I spend, I think it was $7,500 for him. Why should I spend $7,500? I said, did you just hear what you said? You're operating in a loss here. It could be a profit. Every day you can work with your dispatch and operation to move your traffic patterns in different directions to get the highest rate of return. And you might make an extra $300,000 or $400,000, but you won't invest $7,500. It makes no sense to me. And one of the things I found out is that many times we learn our lesson, but we don't learn our lesson. So over the next couple of podcasts, I want to talk about defining your cost. I want to talk about recognizing what you need to do to stay ahead of the curve. And I also want to talk about don't forget about the lessons you learn because they are critically important to your growth and survival. Until next time, thank you for attending the podcast.